Hello, world. Are you awake? Uniting humankind by liberating millions of minds at a time. Maverick News. The world is watching.
And you can help us out by donating at freedomreporters.com. That's the URL to go to. It'll take you straight to the donation page. Well, there it is. That's the URL, freedomreporters.com. And that helps keep us on the air and cover the bills. So if you're so inclined, just type that in the URL bar.
Because we're working hard for you 7 days a week, ladies and gentlemen.
That's right.
We did 4 hours last night. We did 6 hours the other night. We had Scott Ritter on for 3 hours. We do some long broadcasts, and it's a lot of work.
Yep.
Let me tell you, it's a lot of work.
And that's just what you see. That's airtime. That doesn't include all the prep time.
Yeah.
And everything that goes on behind the scenes.
It's about I guess I'm committing about 8 hours a day to this week, because we spend, 3-4 hours on the air or longer. And then there's several hours of show prep and reviewing the previous night's show and all that kind of thing. It takes a big chunk of time.
Oh, yeah.
And my God, you're juggling all kinds of things and a real job too, and producing another show. I don't know how you do it, Rick. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't really have a real job, by the way. I don't. I just run my little media company that I have here, and that's it. So
living the dream, baby.
Yeah, and this actually consumes almost all of my time now. This is just about all I do. Like, I still do my car show, but this takes more time than that.
I'm sure.
Yep.
Oh yeah. I was just thinking about that yesterday, how much time you must put into this show.
Mm-hmm.
Literally working day and night. I mean, I have another job. I work graveyard shift, and sometimes I'll get a message from you at 4:00 in the morning. And I'm like, this man never sleeps, and he's up working on the show.
Well, anyway, I'm not complaining. I like it. I find it fulfilling because I know we're making a difference. We are, especially in the last week or two. We've had some real success here, and it's growing. In the past week, especially, since you came on.
No, I don't have anything to do with this.
Oh, I think so. People like you.
No, they don't.
Like you. Yes, they do.
Well, some of them do.
Yeah, they're warming up to you, boy. Oh, yeah. You've even the ones who don't like change, you're winning them over too. That's the only reason you get any negative comments is just because people don't like change. And I've had far more negative comments than you. That's for sure. And I'm still getting them, but that's okay.
Life is so unfair, isn't it? It's just so unfair.
So, we have a lot of trolls, I noticed too. We have from day one. And I'm sure those guys get paid to just sit in the chat and stir things up. How else what other reason would someone who doesn't like the show and doesn't like what we're saying, why else would they be here night after night after night, weeks and weeks and months on end?
Why do they watch? I know. That's strange to me.
To rip it.
Right?
Yeah.
There's this one lady in chat the last few nights. I'm not going to say her name, but I think her whole reason for being here is to just type a mean comment about me every 3 seconds. She's called me every name in the book, just does not like me. That's the whole reason she watches, is just hurl insults at me. She never talks about anything else.
Oh.
So,
okay.
Some jealous bitches out there. You just jealous bitches. No, but everybody's been so nice and welcoming to me this week, really, except for, the few. But yeah, overwhelmingly, thanks everybody for making my first week a little bit easier.
It's
It's
actually kind
been
of,
it's been hard,
yeah.
but I have health challenges too, and that's part of the reason why I struggle with the demands of doing a,
Mhm.
a show every day.
And I guess we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight.
If you don't mind, I'd like to. I guess it's Sunday, and I need a confessional. I feel like I'm talking to my priest. But I want to talk a little bit about
I've
long
never been called a
COVID.
priest before. That's a new one. If you're talking about me,
Father, forgive
um,
me, for I have
there
sinned.
there might be a priest or two in the audience, but not sitting in this chair. I do my best, but I'm sure I've sinned a little too much for
To be a father,
to be
speak to me, my
yeah.
child.
But yeah, anyway, go ahead. Where do we start with this?
I thought it'd be easier if you could kind of interview me. For the
Mhm.
record, I'm a COVID long hauler, and
Okay.
I've had long COVID for 2.5 years, and I kind of wanted to talk about it, but I'm not sure how to start. So, since you're a professional at this, maybe you can coax that information out of me with a few good questions, get me talking, and I'll
Well, this is
confess.
this
I'll,
is
I'll
yeah,
tell you
this is
everything.
a little bit different direction than I thought this conversation would go in. Initially, I suggested to Lori that we talk about healthcare because the other night she mentioned something about her mom and socialized healthcare, and I thought we could have a discussion about socialized medicine. But then she
And that all
mentioned
ties
this
together.
to me. It does.
Mhm.
So it's a personal story for you. So why don't you just take us back and tell us about how you contracted COVID?
Well, it was January 13th of 2020. Let me take you way back in time. Think back to January of 2020, the middle of January. We here in the North American continent had not heard much about coronavirus. It was just starting to emerge in China. If you were paying attention, you might have noticed that there was this strange pneumonia, they called it, that was making the rounds, but it wasn't on most people's radar over here. Um, I woke up on the 13th just feeling like I was coming down with a cold. And the next day, I was a lot sicker and I felt like, oh, this is the flu. Right. And before that, I hadn't had the flu in 13 years. I hardly ever get sick. I always had a really strong immune system. I eat healthy. I'm kind of a organic health food nut, lived a healthy lifestyle, active lifestyle. So I didn't have any pre-existing conditions or anything like that. And on the 14th, I was like, whoa. As the day went on, it was like the worst flu I'd ever had. And there was something strange about it. It's hard to describe, but it was like no flu I'd ever had. It was like no fever I'd ever had. My fever kept going up. Then on the 15th, I woke up and I couldn't breathe. It was the scariest feeling ever. I'd never had pneumonia before. My lungs were filled with fluid. I felt like I was drowning. And yeah, by the end of the day, I had to call an ambulance. I ended up in the hospital. They did not, thank God, put me on a ventilator. I don't think that they knew to treat with ventilators yet. Again, doctors in the United States had never even heard of COVID. When I was hospitalized, I was diagnosed with a viral pneumonia of unknown origin. That's what they called it.
Mhm.
Doctors here had never heard of this new SARS-CoV-2. They weren't calling it COVID yet. It didn't have a name. It was totally off the radar. They just diagnosed me with pneumonia. I was hospitalized for several days. They sent me home. They didn't know how to treat it either. There were no monoclonal antibodies. There was no Paxlovid. There was no treatment whatsoever. They didn't even know what they were dealing with. So I guess what saved my life was antibiotics, because I did have a secondary bacterial pneumonia infection, and steroids, which are commonly given to people with pneumonia. But that's all they gave me, and bed rest. So after, it just seemed like it would never go away. The symptoms hung around for a month. I was really, really sick well into February of 2020. And of course, by that time, everybody was starting to pay attention to this virus out of China. And it was killing increasing numbers of people in China. It was spreading across Europe and killing people in a wave. And so then Americans were paying attention to it, but there still wasn't a way to test for it. We didn't have PCR tests, swab tests. So by about the middle of February, my doctor noticed I was not getting well. I still couldn't breathe. I was on oxygen 24 hours a day, couldn't get out of bed. I ran a high fever all the time. And my doctor said, maybe this is that COVID stuff that's happening in China. And I said, oh, shit. Please tell me it's not that. Because I saw people dying, in the early days of the pandemic, that original wave out of Wuhan that was such a killer when the virus was at its full strength. I mean, it was killing healthy young doctors who were just collapsing, just dropping dead at work. It was attacking healthy young people. It was attacking old people, but it was also attacking healthy people like me. And I had to beg and beg and beg when they finally rolled out the PCR tests. That would have been mid to late March. And my doctor and I both had to beg the state health department to get me tested because they didn't have criteria. You had to meet very stringent criteria to get tested in the early days of the pandemic. There weren't enough tests available. There was a shortage of tests. So you had to have either traveled to China, which I hadn't. You had to have either a positive test, which obviously I didn't, or you had to have been in contact with a confirmed case before they would test you. I didn't meet any of those criteria. To this day, I don't know where I got COVID. I mean, nobody was masking back then. Nobody was social distancing. It was just, life was still normal. It was still like 2019, I think I got it at a restaurant and bar. Probably because it was after a night out on Saturday night with some friends. A couple days later, I woke up feeling ill. That's how it started. So it was mid-April before I could finally get a PCR test. And of course, by that time, I tested negative. I was already 3 months past the initial infection by then. And they didn't even have the antibody tests available until, I want to say, early May of 2020. And that's how my doctor was able to confirm that, yes, what I had back in January was, in fact, COVID-19. So I still wasn't well, right? 6 months later, I was not well. A year later, I was not well. And I started to develop all these weird other symptoms that were not part of the original COVID infection. Remember, back then, they thought COVID was just a respiratory thing.
Right.
They didn't know that it affects the brain. It affects the heart. It affects the circulatory system. It affects a lot more than just your lungs. And if you're unfortunate enough to have long COVID, it spreads throughout the entire body. I mean, it literally leaves no organ untouched. It gets in your bloodstream, and the virus is all throughout your body, and it's persistent. It just doesn't go away. So there's a video I'd like to run, if you have it, like the first few minutes of this little clip about long COVID.
Sure.
Just for those of you out there who might not understand the weird plethora of symptoms and what it does to the body. But I'd like to run that if we can.
Do you have it on your end, or do you want to send me a link, or do I have it already?
I think I sent it to you before the show. Check your WhatsApp.
Oh, okay. Oh, there it is. I didn't. Okay, let me just, I'll cue that up.
Great.
Sorry, I missed that one, but I'll cue it up now.
Thank you. This is hard for me to talk about. It's the first time I've ever told my story on camera about how it personally affected me. And one of the things that gets me is when I hear people say, oh, COVID's not real. I mean, I understand it's a plandemic. I think personally think that COVID was a bioweapon that was unleashed upon the world. And I feel like I got hit by a bioweapon. If you've ever had a really bad case of COVID, if you've ever been hospitalized with COVID, you know what I mean. If you've got long COVID, I know you know what I mean, because you know it's the weirdest disease ever. It doesn't fit any clinical profile. Doctors don't understand it. Scientists don't understand it. Nobody can explain why it does what it does and why. I mean, have you ever heard of having a fever over 100 every single day for more than 2 years? Think about that. Think of the last time you had a high fever. Were you able to get anything done? Was your brain just like mud? You couldn't think clearly. You had no energy. Fevers do terrible, terrible things to the body. So yeah, let's play this from the beginning. Like, let's play about the first 5 minutes or so.
Now I have to ask, is there anything in here that could get us in trouble on YouTube or Facebook?
I don't think so. I mean, it's on YouTube and it's
So was Donald Trump when we had a clip from him and we got banned.
it's all pretty mainstream science.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. I tried to pick something that would be safe to play.
Okay. I'm very nervous.
Hopefully.
Very nervous. Just, yeah, you know how they are.
Yes, I do.
Okay, here we go.
Here goes.
I got sick and I just never got better. It hit every system in my body, the internal tremors and vibrations. This is me now.
I get emails and messages from people who are suffering from long COVID every day. Some of these stories are very emotional and devastating.
Feeling sick all the time, belly aches all the time, leg aches, and then I get headaches, like pains in my eyes. I don't feel like myself anymore.
I can't work, I can't drive. When I do drive, I feel like I am driving drunk.
Exhaustion to the point where you can't remember your kids' names.
I am formerly an ICU nurse and have not been able to do that in almost a year. I have horrible vertigo. The mental fog is like nothing I've ever experienced before.
It's absolutely the worst hell you could ever imagine.
Their lives have been ruined by long COVID, and they're no longer able to go back to work or work at the full pace that they were used to doing. These stories are accumulating within me and drive me really to do more research and to try to find something that we can do to help the suffering of these people. There's urgency to understanding this disease because there are people suffering so much so that they are contemplating of taking their own lives to end the misery. If we can stop one more person from such an act of desperation, I think we would have done our job. So, you know, every day, every minute counts, and I understand that, and that's part of the reason I don't get much sleep. When COVID hit in early 2020, my lab was ready to tackle some of the key questions, such as how does the immune system respond to the virus infection, and what causes severe disease versus mild disease. But during the course of investigation, we've also been encountering a lot of people telling us about their lingering symptoms that last for a very extended time period, some of which are debilitating.
The symptoms that I have every day are fatigue, nausea, dizziness, headache, and some sort of pain. I have a lot of GI issues. I'm very nauseated most of the time. It's hard for me to eat a full meal without getting sick.
I have joint pain, muscle pain, fatigue, tremors, brain fog, severe anxiety. I'm not even the same person I was before. It's completely ruined my life. It's completely changed my life.
Through the conversation with the patients and the doctors who are treating these patients, we became quite aware of this phenomenon of long COVID. We didn't anticipate so many people becoming ill with long-term consequences. Hospitalized patients who are discharged may have 50% of those having long-term symptoms, whereas a mild COVID or asymptomatic ones may lead to much less prevalence, but still in the 10%, 20%, 30% range. So that's a lot of people. Vaccination and prior infection will likely reduce the chances of you getting severe COVID and even potentially long COVID, but it's not a guarantee. Some people get long COVID after being boosted and gotten a breakthrough infection. Even if the pandemic virus spread were to stop today, we still have tens of millions of people suffering long COVID. And that's a parallel pandemic that's happening, which is getting a lot less attention than the acute and severe COVID, even though the cost to lives and the quality of lives that these people have to live with are very limited. Long COVID can impact any part of the body. It's really not a respiratory only disease at all. And it basically involves every organ systems that one can imagine, starting with the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, the GI tract, the respiratory, cardiac, musculoskeletal system, just basically everything. Depending on the person, it may be a set of organs that are involved or just one. There's a huge heterogeneity, but I don't think any organ is spared from the impact of long COVID.
100.1. Yesterday was my 20-month anniversary of having a fever. So I've had a fever for 20 months and 1 day. Doctors don't know why I have a fever. I've been to the Mayo Clinic, and their solution was to not think illness thoughts.
You may have heard that long COVID is a mental illness. I can guarantee you it is very physical as well. One of my symptoms is muscle spasms, where randomly some of my muscles will contract, leaving me in pain. Because of that, I'm trapped in this wheelchair, this bed, and this room. Long COVID isn't just mental, it's physical as well, and I spend most of my time in total physical pain.
We are seeing clear biological differences in the measurements that we're making in long COVID patients compared to people who had COVID who fully recovered from COVID. We need to kind of move beyond this notion of psychosomatic origin of disease and really look into the biological origin, biological reasons why these people are suffering.
We can pause it there. I just wanted to add something.
200 symptoms reported for long
I want to come back
COVID.
to this.
Some people have.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Did you say you wanted to stop this?
Yeah, let's pause that for a moment. Sure. I just wanted to comment on that first part. We'll come back to a little more of this later. But I just wanted to say that long COVID is so misunderstood. And I know that so many people out there, I call them the lucky ones, they get COVID, they have a mild cold for a few days, and they fully recover and they go back to normal, just like a cold or the flu. A lot of people dismiss COVID as the common cold or the flu. But ask a long hauler if you know one. And if you don't, you will, because more long haulers are being created every single day, that long COVID, and there's no rhyme or reason who it seems to strike. If there is, science hasn't figured it out yet. Why some people only have a mild case of COVID and they're fine in a few days. And then others, like me, are sick, really sick, debilitated for 2.5 years now. And I don't know if I'll ever be normal again. It's the strangest feeling to have a illness that is novel, that is new, that science doesn't understand, that's so debilitating and can affect you for the rest of your life and take all your quality of life away. If I had cancer, at least there would be treatments. At least there's an understanding of cancer. There's a trajectory, a prognosis for me. But there isn't any prognosis with long COVID. There are no known treatments that work for long COVID. And believe me, I've tried them all. In the early days, before they even had a term for it, like back around April or May of 2020, there were thousands of us who congregated on online support groups. Like on Facebook, there were several support groups that popped up, like Survivor Corps, where people who were not getting well and were really sick got together to compare notes, compare our symptoms, what we're dealing with, and what kind of answers we were getting from our doctors, which of course the answer was none. And yeah, some doctors thought we were hypochondriacs or that we were imagining all of this. I've literally had some doctors try to tell me it was all in my head. And I'm like, no, you're not inside my body. You don't understand what it's like.
So you had doctors saying that it was in your head?
Oh, that's very common. A lot of doctors will say that. And I think it's just because they don't know how to treat us. They're frustrated too. They can't magically cure us, and therefore they don't want to deal with us. You know, I've had doctors drop me because they felt like, well, I've done everything I can do for you. Good luck. So we needed help. And in those early days of the pandemic back in 2020, there was a long COVID study clinic, the first in the country, that opened at Mount Sinai in New York. And I participated in that study virtually, of course, from afar. And I would go to local clinics to get my blood work done and that sort of stuff. And that's when at least some doctors started to listen to us, started to hear us. And then next thing you know, more and more long haulers are appearing, more and more people who are not getting well from COVID. And in fact, are sicker than they ever were with their initial bout of COVID. It might start in your lungs, but then it spreads. And the next thing you know, you're having heart pain, heart palpitations, heart inflammation. You're having brain inflammation. I can tell you myself, it's affected my eyesight. I have constant headaches. I have fevers. I have like flushes of hot and cold throughout my body. I have a problem regulating my body temperature. It's scary. I also have dizzy spells that can come on out of nowhere, and I've passed out many times. I mean, I'll be standing up in the kitchen doing the dishes, and the next minute I'm on the floor, and I don't know how long I've been there. That's frightening. That's really, really frightening. What it's doing to our brains is something we don't understand, and the brain powers the rest of your body. So everything is off in our bodies, head to toe. I'm also now prone to blood clots. You know, that's one of the reasons why sometimes I'll pop out of the broadcast, because I have to literally go get up and stretch and walk around a little bit. My legs, you know, my doctor tells me to always do that because I could get a blood clot in my leg that could travel to my heart and kill me. I mean, it's scary when your doctor says, I don't know what we're dealing with. I don't know what medicines to give you. I don't know how to treat you, but you could die, and at any time. You could have a heart attack at any time. You could have a blood clot at any time. You could have a brain aneurysm at any time. So I've been advised to have my last will and testament filled out and have my final arrangements made. It's scary.
So, of
It's really
course, with our group here, many skeptics.
sure.
Um,
But why would somebody make it up? I mean, really, how do you make such a thing up? Why would I bullshit you? I'm sitting here telling you what happened to me. You can believe it or not believe it, but I bet you probably know somebody who's a long hauler. And if you do, believe them. Listen to what they're saying. Look how they're struggling. I know several long haulers who have now been confined to wheelchairs, like that little kid. They can't use their legs anymore. They were perfectly healthy. These people were mountain climbers. They were dancers. They were entertainers and performers like me. I've been a voiceover artist, a singer, a musician all my life. And long COVID took my music away from me. That's something I've loved since I was a child. I come from a musical family. I've been playing instruments and singing since I was a kid. And with long COVID, it messes with your hearing. I have frequent ear infections and sort of get that like fluid in the ear. Sounds like everything's underwater. So I can't hear to play my instrument. And it's damaged my lungs permanently. I don't think that tissue is ever going to grow back. So I can no longer sing, which is what I love most to do in the world, was to sing. And it's taken my career as a singer away. I was a radio talent, voiceover artist. And, you know, it wears me out just to do this broadcast with you, to use my voice for that long. And my voice now sounds gravelly. And I used to have a pretty clear tone in my voice, and it sounds all gravelly now. As the long haulers say, long COVID ages you prematurely. I went from being a pretty, young 50-year-old when I got it, but now I'm dealing with the same sorts of health problems that my 82-year-old mother had before she died. And I was taking the same medications that she was taking for the advanced stages of COPD. So you got any questions? What?
Yeah. Well, people want and you don't have to say one way or the other, but they're asking if you've had the injection.
No. My doctor advised against it because I already have inflammation of the heart. I have inflammation of the lungs. I have inflammation of the brain. These shots are known to cause tachycardia, heart inflammation. Okay.
I know.
You know out there what I'm talking about. I don't have to say it out loud. But it was not recommended for me. And a lot of long haulers are not able to take the shot for that reason. That's why I've applied for a medical exemption to my company's vaccine mandate at my job, and gave them my doctor's recommendation that I shouldn't take that shot. There's too many risks involved for me. You know what's interesting? And I'll be very careful how I approach this, but it's a fact that the symptoms that you find in people who've been vaccine injured are very, very similar or identical to the symptoms that long haulers have.
I don't even know if we're allowed to say that.
And medical science is aware of this, but they can't explain why that is yet. It just is.
Yeah. And this situation is terrible because even just you saying that could get us banned off YouTube.
Oh my goodness. It's sad when you can't even tell your own story.
Yeah, it is. It's terrible, right?
Your own personal experience. Because I'm not a doctor. I'm not sitting here as some sort of medical expert trying to lecture you about, what long COVID is. I'm just telling you my story.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a true story, folks.
Yeah.
Why would I make this up? My life sucks because of this disease. It's broken me physically. It's broken me financially. It's taken away a career that I made my money from. I can't do the things that I used to do. I'm applying for disability now, as so many long haulers have been forced to do, because we can no longer work our jobs, or we can't work same hours. We can't handle the workload or do certain physical tasks that are required of us. You know, I can't even walk up a flight of stairs without having to sit down and catch my breath. I might have to hook up to oxygen.
Yeah.
Just simple tasks. The simplest things. Taking a shower is one of the hardest things I do every day. Just taking a shower.
I'm not sure where to go with this so that we don't get banned.
I'm sorry.
No,
I didn't want to take you into territory that would get you
I mean,
banned, but it's so important.
It takes just one thing, like just one comment that they don't like, and they don't give you a written set of, you can say this and you can't say that. But I know, because of what's happened and the warnings we've received, especially on Facebook.
Yeah. Facebook censored me quite a bit on.
You've been banned, right? What did you get banned
I have
for?
been banned. I wasn't banned for COVID talk. I wasn't banned for vaccine talk. I was banned for posting Putin's speech at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum.
Oh.
Just a speech by a world leader that was kind of important, kind of newsworthy. But Facebook decided I was Putin's mouthpiece.
That'll do it.
I was guilty of wrongthink, and after 11 years on Facebook, out I went. Permanent ban. No opportunity to appeal.
Permanent.
So,
Permanent. Ban.
Yeah, they kicked me out.
Did you have a record of previous warnings and bans? I suspect so.
Not for 11 years. It wasn't until, actually, it was the Freedom Convoy that got me in trouble the first time. I got my first strike on Facebook in February, when I was reporting on the Freedom Convoy every single day. And I noticed that my posts about it, anything about the Freedom Convoy, got throttled and was, hidden in search results. You had to come to my timeline if you wanted to read about it. And then I started getting strikes over that and over the People's Convoy, the USA version. Then the war in Ukraine started. And I wasn't parroting the mainstream media narrative. I knew it was bullshit. I was telling what I think is the truth. I was reporting at least the other side of the story, Russia's side of the story. I was posting articles and videos from RT. Then they banned RT. Right. But I kept posting articles from RT, and Facebook didn't like it. And so, yeah, I started getting strike after strike. And then as soon as my 7-day ban would expire, on the 7th day, they'd find another reason to ban me for another 30 days or restrict my account. And I know that's happened to you here on YouTube. Like, you'd have a little 7-day strike, and one strike expires. All of a sudden, they find another reason to punish you some more. And I don't know how many strikes you're on or how close you are to getting the plug pulled on this show. So I'm trying to be really, really careful as I talk about this, and trying to just frame it as my personal story, because they can't ban you for that. You're just interviewing a COVID long hauler, I would think.
They can do whatever they want.
You're not giving medical advice, right?
They don't care.
I guess that's...
No, they don't care. It's anything. I wish they actually would tell us exactly what you can and can't say.
Well, I do too.
And it seems to change a little bit over time, right? But
I was actually going to message you before the show today and ask you, is there a list of like specific things I can and cannot say on your YouTube show?
Well, there was a time when you couldn't say anything about the Wuhan lab. You couldn't talk about it, really. If you did, that would get you banned. Now I'm not so sure. I think you can talk about it, but I think even then you still have to be careful what you say. And I think that, the Wuhan lab, yeah, that's the focus for me. I'm trying to be careful what I say.
Mm.
If you want to know where it came from, I think you don't have to look too much further than that.
I have another theory about that, and I don't think I can say it here.
Are you going to suggest that maybe it came from a place closer to home?
That's correct.
Mhm.
Need I
I
say
think,
more?
yeah, and I think that's part of the big secret, the big, what?
The big lie.
Yeah.
It's very kind. Helen
Yeah.
in the chat. I love Helen. She said, I'm sorry to hear about your story and your struggles, Lori. Thanks. Thank
Yeah.
you. I appreciate sympathy. I didn't come here today to talk about this to get your sympathy, but I'm kind of a activist now. Having long COVID made me an activist for long COVID sufferers. Because there are millions of us, and there's going to be millions and millions more in the years to come. And we're suffering out here, and we're the forgotten victims of the pandemic.
Seems to me that first wave was the worst.
Absolutely.
And that follows what, I would expect to see from the evolution of a virus naturally. Viruses evolve over time and become less lethal because they want to survive, so they don't really want to kill their host.
Right. That's why the 1918 Spanish flu that killed millions is now just a common everyday flu. They become weaker over time.
And you got COVID before people knew what COVID was. So you
Or
were
how to
like
treat
there.
it.
Yeah, or even how to treat it.
Yeah.
So,
I technically, I guess I'm one of those patient zeros because the United States, anyhow, didn't have an official COVID case until I think January 20th or 21st of 2020. It was that guy in Seattle who supposedly brought it back from China. But I can tell you, I was sick a good week before that.
and people are in the chat saying, somebody said, Rick, stop being a chicken. Well, you know what? It's not about being chicken. It's just, I don't want to be stupid. You want me to just not be a chicken, and then you know what? We're gone. It's like that simple.
If you enjoy the show, folks, you don't want him to get kicked off the air. There won't be any more Maverick news.
That's right. Because
I think they have a 3-strike policy, don't they?
Yeah, but they'll ban us, and then that'll be that, right?
Yeah. And you've probably got a couple strikes already.
Do it like that.
Yeah.
That's the truth. So I can sit here and be brave and stupid, but how brave? What's the point? So I can either be careful what we say, and we get to talk about a lot of other things and make a difference in a lot of different ways. And sometimes we can then jump over to Rumble and just talk about stuff in a more free and open way there, but not enough
I
of
like
you
Alicia's idea.
have subscribed over there.
Alicia Smith says maybe we should do the show one day a week on Rumble where we can talk about all those forbidden subjects.
Yeah.
One day a week, maybe do our Sunday show on Rumble or something like that.
Well, we can just sign off of all these channels and go over to Rumble right now.
Sure.
And we can just say whatever you want.
I mean, we're almost done for the day. We're almost up to 3 hours, and people don't want to hear me whine for an hour about my health problems, I'm sure. But I just wanted to bring this to your attention. Long COVID is forgotten. We are the forgotten victims of this pandemic. The whole focus all along has been on how to help those who have acute current COVID infections, the hospitalized people, the people who are at risk of dying. And yes, that's very important. But then the vaccines rolled out, and there's been so much controversy and talk about the vaccines. So somewhere in the midst of all that, medical science forgot about us. We haven't been a priority. Only now, 2.5 years later, Congress here in the United States is finally doing an inquiry into long COVID, which will probably turn out to be meaningless. The trouble is nobody understands it. And They're finally trying to put some federal dollars into research on this, but just now took 2.5 years. And here's the really heartbreaking part of this story. Long COVID is so debilitating, and it's taken the quality of life away for so many people that we do have long haulers out there committing suicide. I know several in my own support groups who just couldn't take it anymore. They couldn't take living as a shell of their former self, or the chronic pain, or the inability to provide for themselves and their families. And it just became too much. And they gave up hope, because we don't have any hope. Long haulers literally don't have any hope. The only friend that we have is time. Time seems to be the only thing that's helping us get better. I've tried every experimental medication treatment out there in these many clinical studies where I've been a lab rat, and nothing really helped. Maybe a little, but nothing really worked. Nothing cured me. And all I can tell you is it's a slow process of getting better. I'm better now than I was 6 months ago. I'm healthier now than I was a year ago. Now I can walk a little further. I can take a few more steps every day. A year ago, Rick, I would not have been able to do this broadcast with you. There's no way I could have talked for 3 hours without having a coughing fit, without running out of air. In the first year, I couldn't even get a sentence out without having a coughing fit or gasping for breath. And I had to be on oxygen 24 hours a day. It took me 2 years to get off the oxygen, where I no longer need it. And you have good days and bad days. Anybody out there with a chronic illness knows what that's like. You know, you have good days and bad days. You have good days and not so good days. Today's been kind of a rough day for me physically. And it's just like that. And it's become my new normal. And I hate it. And I hate it for all the people out there who are suffering with long COVID. It's real. I believe you. There might be people in the chat who say, oh, you people are all just making this up. Well, screw you. I know what I'm living with. I know it's real. And if you don't believe me, that's fine. But it's real. It's very, very real.
Well, that's Lori's personal account. And
that's Lori's rant.
Yeah, there you go.
I finally got my rant in.
Yep. And then there are a lot of issues surrounding it all. And there's the way the government responded, which I don't agree with. And there's the whole vaccine thing. So, you know, people have a wide range of views on all of these different things. But that is Lori's personal story. And I'm grateful that you shared that with us tonight.
Thanks for letting me, Rick. It's been on my heart. I've wanted to talk about it for a long time. And you're the first media outlet to give me the chance to tell you my story and to share my story with all of you out there. I don't know if we have any long haulers here in our Maverick family. Might be some. But thank you for listening to me. Thank you for giving my story a few minutes of your time and your thought, and prayers are appreciated.
And I know there are people out there who doubt all of it, maybe just reject it, but I had it. And it was weird, but it wasn't nearly as severe as what you went through. But I had it, back.
Did you get Omicron or
I
Delta?
don't know which, who knows?
You don't know?
I think it was the Delta one or whatever. But, I was sick, pretty sick for about a week.
I remember that.
And then I couldn't stop coughing, but it wasn't, I got over it. It was like a bad flu, but it was weird. I tested positive, whatever. So yeah, there's no doubt in my mind I had it, and I know where I got it.
Do you?
Yeah, I know exactly where I got it. A guy came to my place in my studio. He'd been vaccinated, and he was coughing up a storm when he came inside. And he said, "It's okay, I'm vaccinated." behind me, and he was coughing all over me.
Mhm.
And yeah, it didn't take long. And then I had it. And I
About
got,
2 days for your onset. When did you start to feel symptoms after that?
yeah, it was about 2 days.
Mhm.
Yep. It was about exactly 2 days. And then I
Right.
got really sick for a couple of days. I was very sick. It was like the flu. But the weird thing about it was it moved around, and
Yes.
it changed over time. You know, moved to different parts of my body.
Mhm.
And yeah, the brain fog was there, but I think because it was a later version of the virus, it evolved. I don't think it was nearly as severe as what you had to go through. I'm
Right.
certain of it. So,
Yeah.
you know,
I think that's true as the virus has continued to weaken as it mutates. Here's the blessing of Omicron. It gets, weaker but more contagious. So everybody got Omicron a few months back, about 6 months back, around the holidays. It was just like spreading like wildfire. But most people, vaxxed or unvaxxed, in fact, the unvaccinated fared better in terms of beating Omicron. It's a lot weaker. I got Omicron. I've had COVID twice now. I was so scared, Rick, of getting COVID again, right? After going through 2 years of hell. And I got it. I don't know how. I don't know where, but I got it. I got Omicron. And I was so scared that I was going to die. I was going to go back to the hospital. It was going to be worse the second time around. The first time damn near killed me. And I thought, oh no, I'm going to die this time for sure. I fought this long and this hard, and I didn't take my own life, and I survived, right? Only to get COVID again and die. That's what I was afraid of. And then I got it, and it wasn't bad. The second time around, it was like a cold. No big deal the second time. Omicron was like nothing compared to the first wave, that original virus out of Wuhan that was so strong and it was a killer. If you got COVID in 2020, it was very intense for a lot of us.
Yeah. And Dr. Fauci.
Oh, don't
Somebody
get me
ought to hold
started
that guy
on
accountable.
guy.
Yeah.
I have a lot of reasons to be mad at Dr. Fauci. He didn't even acknowledge that long COVID existed until like late 2020. He kept avoiding the subject. He did not want to talk about it. Not want to talk about it. The NIH has been no friend to long haulers in terms of funding studies on us, trying to find a treatment, trying to find a cure. They don't give a shit about us. Nobody gives a shit about long haulers. I guess they think we're all making it up. Or, sorry to hear you've had a fever for 2 years. Sorry you're in a wheelchair. That's tough luck, kid.